Alright, so we're going to be presenting the narrative technique from chapters 11 to 15 in Invisible Man. More specifically, we're going to focus on scenes that are dramatized, scenes that are narrated, and scenes that also differentiate from those 2 points. In addition, we're going to hone in on the reliability, the defects, and the conscientiousness of the narrator. Now you can think of the conscientiousness as how Malcolm from Malcolm in the Middle will stop the show, he'll look into the camera, and he'll say whatever he feels or thinks of in that exact moment. This relates to how the narrator goes about his thoughts or feelings in the book. And then lastly, we're going to just scratch the surface at one of the initial awakenings that the narrator goes through. Now with that said, we're going to go right into Zach's points.
Alright, class, so for narrative techniques, I have 2 interesting points I'd like to make. Well, it comes from the question, which scenes are dramatized and which are narrated? Now, considering it's a first-person sort of thing, it's mostly narration. However, there's 2 interesting points where it differs slightly. The first is in the beginning of chapter 11, where you could see the narrator is a bit delusional due to the shock of the place blowing up, where he sees the third eye, and it burns into his, kind of showing a bit of an awakening, or a bit of pretty much an intellectual awakening. And the second is in the chapter immediately after that, in chapter 12. He presents the first half of the chapter in a weird sort of way, where it's like either you could qualify it as a stream of consciousness, or actually third person. So you could say those scenes dramatize the point of his intellectual awakening as to the actualities of the world, as he did not quite know before. And that is all I have. And with that, we'll bring it to Brittany and John.
One of our questions was, to what degree is the Invisible Man a reliable narrator? Does he have emotional or intellectual defects that influence how he responds? We discussed that the Invisible Man suffers from defects of being easily angered, like the incident in the prologue, and even during the eviction he got really angry really fast, so he's very quick-tempered. Also, he isn't exactly reliable because he suffers from a racial bias because of growing up in the South. At this point in the novel, we notice that he becomes more aware of the racial barriers in the North, but he isn't fully accustomed to them because of so long shying away from the stereotypical blackness. The narrator is
Go.
The narrator is often confused and stressed, especially when he is on the hunt for a job. At this point, he becomes even more unreliable, and we also see that in his kind of psychological break when he shatters the bank and does some pretty crazy stuff.
Another question we had was, when and how does the Invisible Man show that he is conscious, that he's telling you his story? We saw the incident at the paint factory, like a spiritual rebirth, and we discussed that his awakening in the hospital, like the kind of blurriness and stuff, that was the actual awakening. His loss of hearing and awakening was like a newborn baby in a way. Then post-explosion, he had like a boosted drive for a search in his identity, and we see that change of his consciousness in the way the story is being written, because instead of it being more verbal, it's like his train of thought in a way, and it carries on throughout most of the part in the novel.